Well, we're excited about what God is doing at Rock Harbor, and we want to invite you, if you missed last week's message, go online, check it out. It's on the website, it's on social media, but get caught up because we were able to announce that we're launching a brand new church in the fall. This is not going to be a multi-site church. It's an independent church, and Doug's going to be the lead pastor at it. We prayed as ending last year to the beginning of this year about what is God calling us to do, and he has clearly spoken.
My wife and I, Heather, we are super excited about what God is doing in our hearts. And one thing that we're really just pumped and excited is that we get to start this new church with Rock Harbor. We love Rock Harbor. We love everything about Rock Harbor. And we are so pumped that we get to join and be part of this with them. Our hearts are for South Meridian and Southwest Boise. And so we're excited that God is going to show us the facility to meet at, and so we're looking for that. You can be in prayer for us with that. And also, some of you have asked, like, what is the church's name going to be? We're kicking around a few ideas, and so just be praying for that. We're kind of thinking of Harbor Rock as a possibility, so just kidding. But we're really excited about what God is going to do through this new church.
We launched into 2016 with this calling to not just grow as a church, but to grow up. And three of the things that we were praying about was, should we launch an independent church? Should we launch a multi-site? Should we secure long-term property, space, rented, borrowed, leased, something in Northwest Meridian? Well, the truth is God has spoken and we're launching a church. But I want to be honest with you. We very well may be doing the other two options at some point in the near future. We believe God has just begun his work, what he's doing in this valley, and specifically Meridian.
Maybe you're feeling led to be part of this new church in South Meridian. About mid-April, we're going to be asking for those of you who are interested in that. So we encourage you to truly, truly pray about your involvement in this.
And Rock Harbor, we really want a couple hundred people to be sent out with this. And you may say, hey, how do I get connected? There's going to be opportunities to sign up for some things. But specifically, if God's laid it on your heart right now, please reach out to Doug. Let him know. If you're watching online, we invite you to go ahead and check out the rest of today's message as we get to hear from Doug. If you're live and you're in the audience right now, would you please put your hands together for the Doug Connolly? Woo-hoo-hoo! Yeah!
So that right there is the reason why I want to start a new church. Oh, man. Well, good morning. It's great to see you here this morning. And we did talk about that a little bit last week. So if you missed it, I'd love for you to go back and watch the video from last week's message. And Keith did a great job. We really are excited. It's a bittersweet thing, but we're excited about what God is going to do. And as we talked about in the video, there's a couple things. The facility is a big prayer request. Somewhere south of the highway is where we're praying for and asking God to show us where to go, and pray that he's going to open up the right facility for us. Also, the name. The name is something we're praying through. We're taking a list of names, and maybe you have a suggestion. You would like to give us a suggestion. You can write it on your communication card for the new church. We have some criteria, though, for it. First of all, we want it to be short. We want it to have meaning. Like Rock Harbor, we love the fact that Rock Harbor has a meaning, some meaning behind it. We don't want it to sound churchy, like the seventh star of the seventh slumber church or something like that. We want something that doesn't sound Christianese, but something fresh but powerful and passionate. So you got that? It's going to be easy, right? So we're praying that God would give us the right name. And I'll be sharing a little bit more about our heart in just a moment and why we're doing this. But we're continuing on with a series in the book of John, Meet the Master. So if you guys want to turn there, John chapter 12. This was actually the passage that we were supposed to speak on last week, but because things kind of got moved around because of the announcement, we're pushing it back to this week, which is actually really perfect. And as I've studied this week, it's just really cool to see how God's worked it and threaded His Spirit through the entire message this morning, and just how it's a beautiful time of the year as we're going into Passion Week, and so it's pretty cool. You've heard that line or phrase before, you get what you pay for. You know what I'm talking about? You've heard that before. How many of you have ever bought something before and you got a great deal on it? It was just an amazing deal, and then you got it, and when you got it, you realized why you got such a great deal on it? Because it was a piece of junk. Anybody ever experienced that before? In life, usually, if something is worth something, it's because it has a cost attached to it. Last year, my boys really wanted us to go backpacking. I'd never been backpacking before, and who doesn't love to carry 40 pounds up and down a mountain, right? So we decided to do this, but I realized that I had nothing for backpacking, and I had 2 boys, so it was 3 of us, and I had nothing. No equipment, no sleeping bags, no tents, no hiking boots, no cans of chili. I had nothing. And so I began researching it and realized that it was not cheap to buy some of this equipment. So I started buying some of it, and I ended up spending several $100s just on a few items. Like, I borrowed a lot of it. I didn't even buy all of it, but I spent a lot of money. Now, I'd never been backpacking before, and so I needed an expert, somebody who knew the trails, knew what they were doing, and knew exactly what was going to happen. So, of course, I asked an expert, and I asked Keith Harrington and his boys. And so we went out camping, backpacking. There's a picture of us. And so we get our stuff. It cost me some money, but we were ready to go. We loaded up, and we begin. Nate Fowler told us that there's a great place called Blue Lakes in Cascade, around Cascade, and so we're like, oh, okay, great. So we go, we Google the information, and we begin driving there. We get to the first parking lot where Blue Lake was, and it told us that it was about a mile's trek to the lake. And so we're like, well, we can't do that. Like, we bought all this stuff. We got to go farther than that. So we start Googling the other exits, and of course, Keith is the expert, right? And so we're driving down the path, and it's telling us to get off some side exit here and go down some way, and it meets up to the trail. And so we get off to the side of the road, and there's no trail. There's like no trailhead. But Keith's like, oh, it's going to be okay. And so we start going down, and we unpack, and we unload, and we start going down this mountain, and we walk, and I have no clue about backpacking. I'm scared about the bears. I have no idea what I'm doing. And so we begin walking down this mountain and path, and we walk, and finally, nothing. There's nothing. And so we keep on walking, and and Keith's like, I promise you, the trail's going to be up here soon. I guarantee it. And we walk, and we're completely lost. Another reason why we're starting a new church. So we ended up, we're just like, we're done. We can't walk anymore. I'm tired. I'm old. My body's broken. I can't do this. And so we ended up just camping right where we're at. And you know what? Surprisingly, it was really cool. We're in the middle of nowhere. No one's around. Fortunately, we were by a river. We could get some water. And we had the greatest time with our boys. And we just hung out, looked at the stars. The boys were running around in their underwear. It was crazy. I mean, it was crazy, but we had a good time. But it cost us. It cost a lot of money. It cost my body as we walked up and down the mountain. It cost my sanity. It should have cost us a GPS system if we were smart, right? But we had great memories from that. And some of the best things in life, best memories, things that are worth something usually cost us something. And as we pick up in John chapter 12 this morning, we're gonna see that Mary has a beautiful picture of her worship, and worship that means something, it costs something. That's the big idea this morning. Worship that means something, it costs something. So let's pick it up in John chapter 12 and give a little backstory. Verse 1. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus therefore came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. So they gave a dinner for him there. Martha served. Martha's there. She's worshiping in her own way. And Lazarus was one of those reclining with him at table. Now let me give you a little background. This is 6 days before Jesus will be crucified. He's left this town of Bethany for a time because it kind of got crazy that people were wanting to hunt down Lazarus and kill him, some of the Jewish leaders. But Jesus comes back after a time, and he goes back to Bethany, which is 2 miles east of Jerusalem, where all the Jewish leaders are there, and they want to kill Jesus. So we're getting close to the time of Jesus' death. He knows it. But Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, they all want to celebrate Jesus, so they put on this great dinner. Mark 14 tells us it's at Simon the leper's house. And they go to his house, and they put on this great banquet in honor of Jesus because of who he is and how much they love him and what he has done. And so they're all there. And I have a picture of this banquet room. You can kind of see it up here. It has a little table, and the verse tells us that they were reclining at table. And basically what that meant was they were kind of just laying back kind of relaxing. It was something that the Romans did that the Jewish culture picked up, and they would kind of hang around and just talk. They'd have conversations. You see, at that time, there wasn't a lot of entertainment. They didn't have Edward Cinemas or The Village. And so what they would do is they would go to a room and they would just hang out and conversate. And I can imagine them sharing these stories, and what would happen is there would be people lined up against the back wall just waiting to hear the story of Jesus and Lazarus. And the fact that Lazarus was raised from the dead, and you can understand that it would have created a commotion, and people wanted to know what was going on. I can picture them telling stories, Jesus telling the story about the time that he healed Simon the leper, him telling his other stories of his miracles, the disciples telling everybody what's going on. I can imagine Lazarus telling his story, saying things like, man, I died, it was crazy. And then I woke up in a tomb, and then I walked out and I pulled everything off my face. You should have seen the look on your guys' face. It was crazy. And they're telling stories. But then this is where the story gets kind of real here. And I want to see through the rest of this passage a couple points. That worship oftentimes costs something. And I want to tell you three things. Number one, costly worship is undignified. It's undignified. Let's look at verse 3 and see what happens. Mary, she therefore took a pound of expensive ointment made from pure nard and anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. How many of you have ever had middle school students or have a middle school student right now that just discovered cologne or perfume? Anybody? Yeah. I have a couple of them. And my boy, it's like you go into the bedroom or the bathroom and it's like an Axe bomb went off, or Stetson. It's not even the nice cologne, it's the cheap stuff, and it just fills the room. Now I want you to picture that. This is what's kind of happening, but in a good way. And then what about this? Feet are disgusting. Does anybody agree with me on that one? Okay. Feet are gross. Does anybody actually like feet? Yeah, that's gross. Okay. And if feet are gross now, can you imagine what it was like then? I mean, they were walking and it was dirty. And they had these open sandals where the dirt would get in them. And they didn't have the medicines and the ointments like we have today. And they would probably have sores and calluses and bunions. It was just gross, smelly, nasty feet. Yeah. So what they would do is when they get to the house, as a guest, the servants would come and they would begin to wash these feet. And they didn't have air conditioning. It was hot. And so when a guest would arrive, they would hope for something that would smell a little nice, and they would put a little perfume, a little ointment to kind of make it a little bit smell better. And so what Mary does is not necessarily abnormal, but she does it in an excessive way. She takes this bottle of ointment, this bottle of perfume, and she begins to pour it on the feet of Jesus. Now, Mark tells us that Mary poured it on his head. Which was it? Was it his head or was it his feet? It was both. And Mary begins to take this perfume and just pours it on the head of Jesus and pours it down the feet of Jesus. Now, what she does next is crazy. It's outrageous. Something that would never happen at that time in that culture. Mary took her hair down and begins to wipe the dirt and the filth off Jesus' feet, his body, with her clean hair. This was abnormal. This would never happen. This was outrageous. A woman in this Jewish culture would never let her hair down in public. The rabbis taught that if a wife would do that a husband could literally divorce his wife because of that. And so Mary, she's risking it all. Her reputation, what people think about her. And she goes down and she begins to worship at the feet of Jesus as she wipes Jesus' feet with her hair, and she doesn't care. It's undignified. She's not concerned with what other people think. I think a lot of times we deal with that type of thing. In our lives, we get caught up in our own personal preference of what worship or church should be like. We get caught up in our comfort zones. We get caught up in just fitting in with the people that God places around us. When it comes to our own personal preferences, sometimes we get caught up in nostalgia. We want to go to a church that has music or has the message and worship like we experienced when we were kids. And if we go to a church and the music is different than when we were a kid, or the message is different than when we were a kid, then we can feel like maybe that's not worship. We can get caught up in our own personal preferences. Nate will get up here and he'll say, hey, let's all sing together. Let's raise our hands and worship with passion. And some of us will sit there, be like, I'm not doing that. That's weird. Sometimes we'll get caught up in what people think about us. Man, I would never pray for my meal at my work and let people see me do that. I would never do that. That's undignified. That's weird. I would never share my faith with someone else and let them know that I'm a believer and a Christian. That is annoying. Man, when I'm at Buffalo Wild Wings watching March Madness with my boys, I hope that they would never know that I'm a Christian because they would think I'm weird or I'm different. We struggle with that at times, don't we? And here Mary is. She doesn't care. She's not embarrassed. And she's washing Jesus' dirty, smelly feet. Why? Why is she doing that? Because the least of Jesus is worth the best of us. And she gets that. And she puts everything else aside. She focuses her attention on the one whom she loves. What I love about this passage too is it says that when she poured this perfume and this ointment, it filled the entire house. Not just that room, the entire house, and everyone could smell it. You see, pure worship, extravagant, costly, excessive worship never stays private. When we truly worship God, everyone else around us will know it. So that's the first thought. Costly worship is undignified. Here's the second thought. Costly worship is wasteful. Costly worship is wasteful. You remember as a kid, you had to eat something you didn't like, and your parents were like, you need to eat that because there's starving kids in Africa. I mean, you remember that? And you were like, well, send the food to them then, right? We feel like that. I mean, that's a waste. But I think it's interesting how Mary wastes what she has on Jesus. Look at verse 3. It says, Mary therefore took a pound of expensive ointment made from pure nard. Now, can we just say that's a weird name and get that out in the open? Some of you ladies were like, I'm more of a Chanel 45, but you would never wear something like this. It's also called spikenard. But what it was a root grown in India. And what they do is they would extract the aromatic oil from this root, and then they would take it to Rome. It was very expensive, very costly. In verse 5, it tells us that it was worth 300 denarii. 300 denarii would be equivalent to a year's wages for a person in that culture. So I did a little Googler. I'm a little Googler. I don't even know if that's how you say it. And I searched and saw that the middle meridian income is $40,000 for a person. So to put this in context, Mary is pouring the equivalent of $40,000 worth of perfume over the feet and the head of Jesus. And she begins to pour this on Jesus, and he's dripping with thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars worth of ointment. Some people would think that's a waste. Actually, they did. Look at verse 4. But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, he who was about to betray him, so many of us know who Judas was, he said, why was this ointment not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor? That's reasonable, right? I mean, why? Why would Mary do this? That's a good question. Why didn't we just take this money and give it to the poor? Well, we see next the motives of Judas. He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. And having charge over the money bag, he used it to help himself to what was put into it. You see, Mary does this extravagant, costly thing. And when she does it, all of a sudden, there's critics. People that are against her. In Mark chapter 14, it says there were others as well, other than Judas, who were questioning why she would do this. And oftentimes, people outside of the church, They think they know what the church should do and should not do. And oftentimes, they think the church is a philanthropic organization. That what we're about and what we should be about is helping the poor, helping the needy, taking care of every problem in the world. Now, let me be really clear in this. I believe the Bible teaches us that as Christians, we should be one of the first people that help take care of the poor. We should be some of the first people who take care of the needy. That's what James tells us in the book of James. Take care of orphans and widows. I firmly believe in that. In Rock Harbor, that's one of our core values. One of our 12 is to be community inside and outside of Rock Harbor. That's one of the reasons why we're doing Love Week in a couple weeks, which we're really excited about. Our community groups, over 55 groups, are given $100 each to go do a local project to serve someone locally in our community. We're so excited about it. We're also, in a couple months, we're doing Serve Our City, where we're going to kind of halt our normal services. We're all going to meet together, and then we're going to go out and serve our community for an entire morning. We help with organizations like World Relief and Meridian Boys and Girls Clubs. We have an outreach committee that helps find projects for us to do as a church. We're all about serving, and we should serve our community. But here's the point. The point isn't necessarily about serving. The point is this. It's about Jesus. It's about Jesus. And when we have Jesus as the forefront in our lives, everything else takes care of itself. The poor, we take care of them because of our love for Jesus. The needy, we take care of them because of our love for Jesus. And Mary understands this. And she doesn't care, even when people think that it's a waste. As we plant this new church, there are probably people that don't understand. Like, why are we doing this? Like, everything is going really good at Rock Harbor. Like, we love what we have. God is blessing. God is moving. He's doing His will. Why would we do this? It's going to cost us something. It's going to cost us as a church. It could cost us some people going and helping planning the church. It could cost us some finances as we launch this church. Why would we want to do this? For me personally, it's going to cost me some things. My family, I get to work with one of my best friends every single day. I get to work with a staff team that I love dearly. They love me, and we have so much fun together, and I'm so blessed by them. I get to see you every Sunday and get to worship with many of you every Sunday. Why would we want to do this? It doesn't make sense. Why? Here's why. Because God has a calling and a direction and a plan for my life. God has a calling and a plan and a direction for this church, Rock Harbor. And there is a need. There are people in this valley that don't have the hope and the gospel of Jesus, that need to have the hope, and we have the answers. We have the resources. We have the ability to go. We have the people. We have the calling. And it's the right time. That's why. Even if other people think it could be wasteful, it's not what Mary thought. And when God grips your heart, it totally transforms the way you look at life. And the things you used to think were valuable are no longer valuable. And now the things you think are valuable are the things that are valuable to God. Has that happened to you? And the world will look at that and oftentimes think it's a waste. So costly worship is undignified. Costly worship is wasteful, but here's the hope. Costly worship is noticed. It's noticed. Maybe you're here this morning and you feel like you've been faithful. You've been doing the work of the Lord, and you feel like sometimes, God, do you see this? Am I doing this? Do you hear me? God, what's going on? Let me tell you, God notices it. Look what happens in verse 7. Jesus says to Judas, leave her alone, so that she may keep it for the day of my burial. For the poor you will always have with you, but you do not always have me. I'm not sure exactly the tone that Jesus had here, but I bet you it was out of frustration and passion. Judas, leave her alone. She gets it. You don't get it, Judas. She loves me. You don't love me, Judas. And the author John here is comparing Mary to Judas. Mary poured everything out to Jesus, but Judas sold her out. Mary had faith, but Judas was a fake. Mary loved Jesus, but Judas loved money. And I believe that Jesus notices. And he notices you when you're faithful and you are pouring out your love and your adoration to him. He sees it. In Mark chapter 14, verse 9, I love this. I love what Jesus says. It's curious and it's interesting, but I love what he says. He's talking to his disciples and he's telling them, look, there's something important I want you to tell everybody. Look at verse 9. Jesus says, and truly I say to you, wherever the gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, he's like, whenever you tell my story, what she has done, what Mary has done, will be told in memory of her. Jesus wants us to know about this story. Isn't that interesting? Why this story? Why would Jesus want us to know about this story? Why didn't Jesus say, hey, look, when you share me with everyone else, when you share the gospel, tell them about the time that I fed 5,000 people with just a little bit of food. Tell them about the time I turned water into wine. That will blow their minds. Tell them the time that I raised Lazarus from the dead. You tell them about that, but that's not what he said. He said, tell them the time when Mary came out with this expensive perfume and poured it all over my body in worship. You tell them about that. Why would Jesus do that? Why would he tell them to tell us about that? Because personal devotion to Jesus delights Jesus. Christianity is not about what we do. It's about who we are. Christianity is not about religion. It's about relationships. Has God got a hold of your heart like that? To the point where we'll say, God, I don't know what you want me to do, but I'm here and I'm willing to do whatever you have called me to do. There's something crazy when God gets a hold of our heart. As individuals, it goes crazy when God gets a hold of our heart. As a church, something crazy happens when God gets a hold of our hearts. And so oftentimes, we want to put a governor on our worship. God, I'll do this as long as it doesn't cost me too much. When was the last time you thought about Jesus ransoming you from death? When's the last time you thought about Jesus dying on the cross and it buckled you at your knees? And that's what's happening with Mary. She's blown away with love and adoration because of the love that Jesus first gave to her. Worship that means something costs something. Is there any area in your life you've roped off with yellow tape? Like you said, God, you can have anything you want from me except for this right here. Is there anything that you're not willing to give up? Something that could even cost you for true worship. Now, what's crazy is that the way the passage kind of laid out, that literally today is Palm Sunday. And as we look towards this week in Passion Week, we're going to remember what Jesus Christ did on the cross for us. And I was supposed to be on the passage of Scripture that talked about Palm Sunday, and I wasn't able to get to it, but I want to read a couple of verses from it. John chapter 12, verse 12. And what happens is Jesus leaves Bethany, and he goes into Jerusalem riding on a donkey, and here's what happens. The next day, the large crowd that had come to the feast heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem, so they took branches of palm trees and went out to meet him, crying, Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, even the King of Israel. And these people are out there screaming and shouting and excited about Jesus because they think that he is the Messiah, the chosen one. And what's interesting is they were right on some level that he was the Messiah, or he is the Messiah. But not the Messiah they thought he was. You see, they thought Jesus was coming to free them from the Romans. The Romans had been horrible to them and persecuted them. And they thought that Jesus was coming to save them, so they're excited. But he wasn't there for that. He was there to save them from their sins. They didn't know who Jesus truly was. My question for you and I this morning is, do you know who Jesus is? Is Jesus just some genie in the bottle for you? Like, I'm going through a hard time right now, so I'm going to rub the bottle, and Jesus, can you come fix this for me? Or is he your master? Is he your Lord? Is he your everything? As I was studying this passage this week, this song came to me. It's a song you might know, but the bridge hit me. It's this. I'll never know how much it costs to see my sin upon that cross. I'll never know how much it costs to see my sin upon that cross. This morning we can talk about how much worship will cost us, but the reality is that Jesus paid the ultimate price for our sins. And this week is our opportunity, believer, to remember what he did for us on the cross. I hope that we don't take it lightly. And then guess what? On Sunday, we get to come and have a party and celebrate him being alive. So what I'd like to do this morning as we close, we're going to receive communion in just a moment. Where are you at? Are you ready for it? Are you ready to receive the elements, the blood and the bread? The bread represents the body that was broken for Jesus. The blood represents the juice represents the blood that was shed for us. And as we take it together this morning, we're taking it in memory of what Jesus did for us on the cross, but then we're looking ahead of when he's coming back for us. Are you ready? So what we're going to do in just a moment is we're going to just take a moment. I'm going to pray, and then the instruments are going to play, and you can just take a time right in your seat. You just have a time of reflection, and maybe there's something in your life you need to get right. Maybe this morning you're not a Christian. You have never given your life to Christ. You've not surrendered your life to him. This is a perfect opportunity to do that. In your seats in a moment, when we all pray together, you can pray to the Lord and say something like, Jesus, I'm a sinner. I know that I'm a sinner. I know that you gave your life for me on the cross. I know that you're the only way to God, and I give my life to you. I surrender my life to you. If you've never given your life to Jesus this morning, you have an opportunity to do that in your seat. You can pray. It's nothing magical. You can pray and just give your life to the Lord. And then for the believer here this morning, what do you need to get right with God? So what I'd like to do right now is just take a minute right where you're at, bow your heads, close your eyes. I'll pray, and then for a minute after that, you can take a time of prayer, and then the band's going to come and play, and we're going to receive the elements together. You just want to take the bread and the juice out of the pan, and then during the song, anytime during the song, when you're ready, you can just go ahead and receive the elements at any time. God, we're so thankful and grateful for all you've done. Lord, you are our Lord and our Master. Lord, and I know that some of us, we've met you before, but we need to meet you new every single day. Lord, there's some people here that maybe have met you for the first time today, and they are surrendering right now their lives to you in their seats. And so we pray for them. We pray for every single person in here that as we go through this week, Lord, we would remember the sacrifice that you made, the price that you paid, and we would be willing to have costly worship. We love you. We thank you for all you've done. In Jesus' name, amen. Just stay there with your heads bowed and eyes closed for a minute in a time of prayer.